Before the silence, there was laughter. Before the betrayal, there was a bond I thought was forged in something stronger than steel. My life, for the better part of 2 decades, was defined by my friendship with Greg Peterson. We weren't just friends. We were an extension of one another. My name is Leo Martinez. I'm 38 years old. I remember one specific afternoon, maybe 3 years before the world went sideways. We were on my small fishing boat, drifting in the middle of Lake Norman. The Carolina sun warming our faces. The air was still. The only sounds, the gentle lapping of water against the hull and the distant buzz of a cicada. My son, Ben, and his son, Josh, were up at the bow, trying to untangle a fishing line. Their hushed arguments, a familiar soundtrack to our friendship. "Look at him," Greg said, nodding towards the boys. He had that easy, magnetic smile on his face, the one that could sell ice to a polar bear. They're us, 25 years ago, arguing over nonsense, thick as thieves. Except they might actually catch a fish, I quipped, reeling in my empty line. He laughed, a deep, genuine sound that echoed across the water. He turned to me, his expression suddenly serious. "You know, Leo," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "We've built something amazing. Precision industrial. It's more than I ever dreamed of. But if anything ever happened to me, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, you're the only one I'd trust. With the business, with Sharon and Josh. With everything. You know that, right?" "Don't talk like that, man," I said, uncomfortable. "I'm serious," he insisted, looking me dead in the eye. "It's all built on us. You're the engine, I'm the gas. It doesn't work without both parts. Promise me you'd look out for them." "You know I would," I said. And I meant it with every fiber of my being. We're brothers. Always. That was the foundation of my world. Greg and I, our wives, Clara and Sharon, who were as close as sisters, and our kids, growing up together. We were one big, messy, happy family. He was the lightning, the charismatic face of our company. I was the thunder, the operational force that made his promises a reality. Our company, Precision Industrial Solutions, was our shared dream made real. A high-stakes sanitation service for massive food and beverage manufacturers. We were the guys they called when failure wasn't an option. We were trusted. We were successful. We were, I thought, invincible. But invincibility is a fragile illusion, easily shattered by the shriek of twisting metal and the cold, indifferent reality of a 2 a.m. phone call. The ring of the phone sliced through the peaceful dark of my bedroom. It was Sharon. Her voice wasn't human. It was a raw, shredded sound of pure terror. I could only decipher fragments. His bike. A truck ran the light. They're taking him to Charlotte General. The world tilted on its axis. The drive to the hospital was a blur of red lights and the frantic pounding of my own heart. The scene in the emergency room waiting area was a tableau of nightmares. Sharon was staring blankly at a wall, wrapped in a blanket, while Greg's parents sobbed quietly in the corner. The air was thick, with the smell of antiseptic and a suffocating, unspoken dread. When the neurosurgeon finally came out to speak to us, his face was a stony mask of professional sympathy. The words were clinical, brutal, traumatic brain injury, multiple internal hemorrhages, medically induced coma. His chances were guarded. It was a sterile, medical way of saying, prepare for the worst. In the days that followed, the hospital became my second home. But a new, more immediate crisis was unfolding. Our company accountant, a timid, perpetually worried man named Arthur, called me in a panic. I met him at a coffee shop near the hospital. He slid a folder across the table, his hands trembling. "It's bad, Leo," he whispered, avoiding my eyes. "Greg just closed on the new equipment loan 2 weeks ago. We have a payment due at the end of the month for $50,000. We don't have the cash flow. Not without the revenue from the new bottling plant contract he was supposed to finalize this week. If we default, the bank can call in all our loans. We'll be bankrupt in 30 days. It was a ticking time bomb. The life my best friend had built was about to be vaporized. I sat there, staring at the numbers, the weight of the world settling onto my shoulders. That evening, sitting in the grim quiet of the ICU waiting room, with Sharon and Greg's father, listening to their panicked whispers about losing the house. The words I'd spoken on that fishing boat came back to me. Promise me you'd look out for them. I took a deep breath, the sterile air burning my lungs. Stop, I said, my voice cutting through their despair. Don't worry about the business. Don't think about it. You just stay here and focus on Greg. I'll handle it. I'll fix it. I made a promise to my unconscious best friend. I would descend into the abyss for him. I would hold his world together with my bare hands. I had no idea that abyss would have teeth, and that it would chew me up and spit me out. My life, as I knew it, was over. I became a machine, a ghost, haunting the edges of my own existence, fueled by stale coffee and a ferocious, desperate loyalty. My days were a grueling marathon that started at 4 a.m. and ended long after midnight. But it wasn't just about keeping the lights on. I was fighting a war on two fronts. The first front was the business itself. News of Greg's accident spread like wildfire in our industry, and the sharks began to circle. A national competitor, a soulless corporate entity called EnviroClean, saw an opportunity to get our company. Their lead salesman, a slick predator named Miller, made it his personal mission to destroy us. He started by trying to poach our top crew chief, offering him double his salary. I had to pull my entire crew together, my hands stained with grease, and give a speech that came from the very depths of my soul, reminding them we were a family, not just a company, and that we couldn't abandon Greg now. They stayed. Miller escalated. He anonymously reported us to OSHA, citing false safety violations, triggering a surprise 2-day inspection that threatened to shut us down. I had to personally guide the inspectors through every protocol I had designed. My mind racing, my body screaming for sleep, flawlessly demonstrating our compliance. We passed, but it was a vicious, stressful blow. He was trying to bleed me out, to break me through sheer exhaustion. The second front, the one that inflicted the deeper wounds, was at home. I was a phantom in my own house. I missed my son Ben's first home run. I missed my daughter Maya's piano recital. I missed my wedding anniversary. I came home late one night to find a single plate of cold dinner waiting for me in the oven. A silent, heartbreaking testament to another promise I had broken to my wife Clara. She confronted me one evening, her voice trembling with a mixture of love and raw frustration. "Leo, look at you," she said, her hands gesturing to my gaunt face, the dark circles under my eyes. "There's nothing left. You made a promise to him, I know. But what about the promises you made to us? To Ben and Maya? To me? You're killing yourself for a man who might not even be the same person if he wakes up." Her words were a dagger, because a small, terrified part of me knew she was right. But I couldn't stop. I had to see it through. Every day, I'd escape to the quiet of Greg's hospital room and give him the report from the front lines. "We held on to the Tyson contract, man," I'd whisper to his still form. "Miller almost had it, but I pulled it out. We're okay. You just get better. Just come home." And then, miraculously, he did. Greg's return from the coma was a slow, painful crawl back to life. I was there for it all, celebrating every milestone, my heart filled with a profound sense of relief and victory. We had done it. We had weathered the storm. But the Greg who returned to the office was a stranger wearing my best friend's face. The easy charm was gone, replaced by a sullen, brooding silence. The accident had left him physically and emotionally scarred, and he seemed to carry a chip on his shoulder the size of a boulder. I tried to walk him through the changes I'd made, the crises I'd averted, the new efficiencies I'd implemented. He'd listen with a flat, impatient expression, almost as if my successes were a personal insult to him. Then, the strange things started happening. Small at first, but they set off alarm bells in my head. I walked into his office one afternoon and saw him quickly shove a folder into his desk drawer. On the tab, I caught two words, new LLC. When I asked him about it, he gave me a smooth, practiced excuse about exploring tax shelters. It felt wrong. A week later, our accountant, Arthur, called me, his voice a nervous whisper. Leo, I don't want to overstep, he said. But Greg asked me for a full valuation of all company assets. The trucks, the equipment, the real estate. But he specifically told me to exclude goodwill and existing contracts. It's the kind of report someone would run if they were planning a liquidation, not a growth strategy. A cold dread began to creep into my heart. I was living in a fog of exhaustion, but even I could see the pieces were forming a dark, ugly picture. He was moving assets. He was valuing the company's shell. He and Sharon would have hushed, tense conversations on the phone that would stop the second I walked into a room. My wife's words echoed in my head. What if the Greg that wakes up isn't the same person? I decided to confront him. Not with accusations, but with a test. I just needed one day off to see my daughter Maya. In her first big dance recital, his response would tell me everything I needed to know. It would tell me if there was anything left of the brother I had saved. I stood before his desk. The coldness in the room was a living thing. His father was there, looking over financials, and Sharon was lingering by the door. It felt less like an office and more like a courtroom where my fate was about to be decided. Greg, I started, my voice hoarse. I need to ask for a day off. This Saturday, Maya has her dance recital. He didn't look up. Recitals don't pay the bills, Leo. The work doesn't take a day off. The words were so dismissive, so callous, they took my breath away. Greg, it's one day, I said, my voice pleading. In 412 days of 16-hour shifts. For my daughter, please. He finally looked up, and his eyes were like chips of ice. Let me be clear, he said, his voice laced with venom. You've had a nice little run playing king while I was away. I appreciate you keeping the seat warm. But I'm back now. This is my company, and I decide what's important. A dance recital isn't important. Now get back to work. It was a deliberate, calculated humiliation. A power play designed to break me. I looked at his father, who suddenly found a spot on the ceiling fascinating. I looked at Sharon, who simply turned and walked out of the room. The betrayal was absolute. A collective shunning by the family I had sacrificed everything for. The rage I expected to feel never came. In its place was a profound, liberating clarity. The man I had saved was gone. This creature sitting in his chair was my enemy. Okay, I said quietly. He smirked. Okay, what? Okay, I quit. I took my keys from my pocket and placed them gently on his desk. The smirk vanished, replaced by pure fury. Fine, he spat. Go, but don't you forget the non-compete you signed. I had my lawyer review it last month. It's ironclad. You're nothing without my company, Leo. You'll be lucky to get a job sweeping floors in this town. You try anything, and I will bury you. He had his lawyer review it last month. The premeditation, the sheer cold-bloodedness of it all, was finally laid bare. They weren't just ungrateful. They had been actively planning my exit, while I was working myself into an early grave for them. I looked him in the eye, and for the first time in a year, I smiled a real smile. It was a cold, sharp, dangerous thing. You should have read it more closely, Greg. Greg's mistake was thinking he had built a kingdom. What he'd actually built was a prison. And I was the only one with the blueprints and the master key. His non-compete was designed to stop me from becoming a rival. But I had no intention of competing with him. I was going to make him obsolete. The following Monday, I walked into the office of Dave Jensen, the plant manager for Coca-Cola, our biggest client. Greg had already called him, of course, spinning a story about me having an emotional breakdown and being fired for incompetence. He said you were unreliable, Dave said, his arms crossed, his expression skeptical. Dave, I said, leaning forward. For the last year, who took your calls at 3 a.m. when a pressure valve blew? Who redesigned your entire sanitation workflow to save you 6 hours of downtime every week. Who was it that averted that salmonella scare last May? Was it Greg Peterson or was it me? He didn't have to answer. We both knew. I laid out my proposal. I wasn't starting a competing company. I was starting a consulting firm. For a one-time fee, I would train and certify his own in-house crew to do the job they were paying Precision a fortune for. I would sell him my knowledge, not my labor. His eyes lit up. It was a no-brainer. I repeated the pitch to our other two major clients. The dominoes began to fall. The ultimate confrontation happened 2 weeks later. I was on site at the Coke plant, running a training session with their crew, when Greg's truck screeched into the lot. He stormed in, his face purple with rage, a stack of papers in his hand. "Martinez," he screamed, his voice echoing through the massive facility. "You're finished. This is a cease and desist. You're in breach of your contract." I just stood there calmly as he ranted. When he was done, Dave Jensen stepped forward. "Greg," he said, his voice calm but firm, "your services are no longer required. Leo is not operating as a sanitation company. He is a consultant hired by me. This is my facility, and I'm going to have to ask you to leave before I call security." Greg stood there, sputtering, waving the useless papers, utterly defeated. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a hatred, so pure it was terrifying. He had lost, and he knew it. He had tried to put me in a cage, but he'd forgotten I was the one who had built it. The end came faster than a guillotine. The termination of his 3 biggest contracts created a black hole in his finances from which he could not escape. The company, already leveraged to the hilt by the loans he'd taken out, imploded. The equipment was repossessed. The office was foreclosed upon. The crew, the men I had fought to keep employed, were all laid off. Arthur, the accountant, told me Greg had descended into a paranoid rage, blaming everyone but himself for his downfall. His personal life crumbled in tandem. Sharon, who had been his co-conspirator, had no interest in being tethered to a failure. She left him, taking their son and half of what little remained. He lost the house, the boat, the life he had taken for granted, the life I had bled for. I, on the other hand, had found a new life. My consulting business was thriving. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the freedom. It was about taking my son to his baseball games and being there to cheer when he hit a double. It was about being home for dinner every night. It was about rebuilding the promises I had broken to my own family. Last Saturday, I sat in the darkened auditorium of my daughter's school. I watched a line of tiny dancers in sparkling costumes shuffle onto the stage. My daughter, Maya, was at the end of the line. She scanned the crowd, her small face a mask of nervous hope. And then she saw me. Her eyes lit up, and a smile so brilliant it could have lit up the entire city spread across her face. She gave a tiny, frantic wave, just for me. Tears streamed down my face. These were not tears of anger or regret. They were tears of profound, hard-won peace. I had descended into hell for a man I thought was my brother. I had fought wars for him. But in the end, the greatest victory wasn't watching his empire fall. It was sitting in that auditorium, a free man, finally able to keep the one promise that had ever truly mattered.